Here it is, ladies and gents, the third and final part of your Chapter 18 notes on water. You're going to need a drink of water after all this. Man, this is a long video series, but super important stuff. So we're going to finish today by talking about dams and their impact, ecologically speaking, like economically speaking, the works, and some water policy, okay? So let's just get this over with, okay? So probably one of the biggest dams in the world that, deserves mention at this point is the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River in China. It's the largest hydroelectric power plant in the world. 15 nuclear power plants would be needed to replace like the energy production that this one dam produces, right? And look how much it costs to build. Now, there's some plus when you think about the Three Gorges Dam and some minus. And really, I just want to apply all of these pluses and minuses of the Three Gorges Dam to all dams in particular. Because at the end of the day, like it seems like more than not, people are really pushing to build more dams to store more water. And like we hear about it in the news all the time. So I want you to kind of understand like both sides of the coin here. All right. So let's check this out. So like first things first, dams provide inexpensive hydroelectric power. So yeah, if you're like fired up, you need electricity, and you've got a large flowing body of water, a large river like the Yangtze, you can generate huge amounts of electricity from a dam. That's awesome. You're going to provide jobs in that dam. There will be people that you need to build the dam, as well as people that are needed to maintain the dam and the power plant. So that's good. Having a dam in place can also reduce flooding. If you've got a massive river, those things tend to wander. They forget which direction they're supposed to go and just kind of meander back and forth across a floodplain. And that's bad for human communities that like to build and stay put. So having dams in place helps control the flow of water and reduce flooding. It can allow for farming on lands that would otherwise be too dry. They can even be used for recreation, right? I mean, you could put boats out there, houseboats, fishing boats, you name it. So there's lots of pluses that go along with a dam, and lots of people like these pluses. So lots of people talk about the positive nature of a dam. Storing this water, having inexpensive hydroelectric power, jobs for people, controlling flooding, and allowing for farming on lands that would otherwise be too dry. Irrigation. There is a dark side to this, so let's flip the coin and look at the other side. So first downside is that if you build a dam, it's expensive. Nothing in this world is free. And as you build that dam, you're going to submerge farmlands and towns behind the dam. As a great case in point locally to us, think about the town of Friant in Millerton Lake. The original town of Friant is now underwater, okay? And as, Friant Dam was built, all the people of the original town of Friant were displaced, along with the native plants and animals of that valley that is now Millerton Lake. Building dams can also create earthquakes. I know, that sounds far-fetched and weird, but the weight of the water on the surrounding rock strata can cause earthquakes. It can block fish migration, specifically for salmon. Some people look at salmon as an incredibly important resource. Other people say, it's just a fish. Why do I care? Other people still say, well, let's find a happy medium and maybe build something like a salmon ladder that the fish can use to get through the dam. All arguments are considered. The dam can change aquatic habitats for native species. It can reduce spring floods, which on one hand sounds good, but on the other hand is actually bad because that spring flood is oftentimes in that floodplain what deposits nutrients on the farmland, and we don't get that anymore. Okay, so there's all these things that we got to consider. Now, at the end of the day, that reservoir that you build behind that dam, it has a limited life expectancy. Sediment carried by rivers will eventually fill up or pile up against the back of the dam and have to be removed. More than 10 million metric tons of sediment per year collect behind the Glen Canyon and Boulder dams on the Colorado. Within a century, those reservoirs will be filled with sediment and useless for water storage or hydroelectric generation unless that stuff gets dredged out. In addition, downriver habitats lose nutrients, beaches disappear as sediment is no longer available. So, get both sides of the argument and you decide. Now, aside from dam construction and all this, we also have to consider some policies, climate change, and what water supplies mean to the rest of us. The IPCC warns that climate change, together with the developing problems of urban sprawl and population growth and pollution, will result in significant water shortages literally around the world. Not just, in this country that's 1,000 miles away that nobody's ever heard of and nobody cares about. Like around the world. It's a global issue. The IPCC predicts that the reduced precipitation and increased evaporation from higher temperatures will result in 10 to 30% reduction in runoff in arid regions over the next 50 years. These water shortages, remember, they're a serious thing because you can't live without this water. In many parts of the world, we're already seeing severe droughts, resulting in depleted rivers, empty reservoirs, and water shortages for millions of people. South Australia is suffering from droughts, water shortages, and wildfires. China is facing a massive water crisis. There's been a prolonged drought in Syria and Yemen that's threatening food supply. So what are people supposed to do? Fight for water? Would you fight for water? Many environmental scientists warn that declining water supplies could lead to wars between countries in the future. Nearly 40% of the world's population live in river or lake basins that are shared by 2 or more countries. So if water becomes scarce, who's going to get the water? There have already been water skirmishes. Israel and its neighbors over the Jordan River, Turkey and Iraq over the Tigris and Euphrates River, nomadic tribes in Kenya over dwindling water resources there. So at the end of the day, you could see people value water and, realize its importance when, you guessed it, when it's not there. Okay. Eventually, we're going to have to figure out how to get by maybe with a little less. In the Klamath River in California, farmers recently signed a water use agreement where they agreed to reduce water usage and install conservation measures. That's a huge step forward. Even just something as simple as installing drip irrigation can make a big difference. Land banking. Some farmers may decide to let some of their land lay fallow in dry years and not try to grow crops that would require heavy irrigation. Walking wetlands. Other farmers may flood fields on a rotational basis to create temporary wetlands, and those strategies allow for farmers to plan ahead and wetland birds to have habitat. Money designed for endangered species protection will help fund the new farming practices. Okay. Price, mechanisms in water policy are going to have to change. Throughout most of the U.S. history, water policies have generally worked against conservation. In well-watered eastern states, water policy is based on riparian use rights. And in the drier western regions, where water is often a limiting resource, water law is based primarily on prior appropriation rights, which ultimately fosters the use it or lose it policy, right? If you've got prior appropriation rights, then you've got rights to the water, and if you don't use it, it's going to get taken away. So if you conserve, you lose your rights to the water in the future. In most federal reclamation projects, customers were only charged for immediate costs of water delivery. Dam and distribution system costs were subsidized, so they never really felt the full cost of what they were doing. Underpriced water in some areas amounted to a subsidy of as much as $500,000 per farm per year. Growing recognition that water is precious and finite has changed policies and changed conservation practices across the United States. Charging a higher proportion of real cost to users of public water projects has helped encourage this conservation, and this conservation has been successful. U.S. today uses 10% less water than in 1980, despite having 37 million more people. That's a huge step in the right direction, if you're asking me. Okay? So let's just finish with a couple other examples of like water diversion and water being used in some crazy ways. This is the Colorado River. So if you think about like water as a necessity and water being redistributed, the mighty Colorado has been given credit for carving the Grand Canyon. And look at all of these states, California in particular, that are all tapping into the Colorado River. The part of California that taps into the Colorado River, by the way, is just one part, and that's the LA basin. Los Angeles cannot or will not produce enough water to support its populace. More than half of its water actually comes from the delta all the way down through the Central Valley over the Grapevine and into LA, right? Another small percentage comes up from the Sierra, and another like 20% comes off the Colorado, right? Many people have asked, well, why doesn't LA just take care of itself? They only pump 20% of their own groundwater. The other 80% comes from other places. Part of the reason why is LA and Southern California is a pretty arid region, and short of building a whole bunch of desalination plants, they really don't have any other choice. All this pressure on the Colorado River from the headwaters all the way down, the Colorado River's been used for recreation. It's, as I said, carved things like the Grand Canyon. There's 7 states now that have water rights to this river, which is like sharing 2 gallons of water, like in a room full of like 40 students. So every one of you is just going to get a sip. And as you look at this Grand River as it courses from Colorado all the way down to the Gulf of California, well, it's tapped into by city after city, state after state, and it's got a number of dams that have been placed on it now. To try to hold back those waters for those surrounding communities. If it weren't for, the Hoover Dam, like, let's just be honest, Las Vegas wouldn't be Las Vegas, because all of their water comes from that reservoir, and as we dam the river and we continue to siphon it off, well, the result is that the Colorado River no longer makes it to the sea like it used to. It becomes a dried up, like muddy trickle before it ever makes it out to sea. It's a travesty. It's sad. At the end of the day, it's because of the demand that's being put on that river. Okay. So what do we do? How do we fix it? Again, there's all kinds of things that you can do on your own in your home to help with water. All right. So low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, zero scape in your yards. Increasing efficiency is the only way to make our water resources last. So here's a statistic to bring this to a close. Increasing efficiency. Look at Las Vegas. Las Vegas has drastically decreased their water use by increasing costs the more you use. So basically, if you pump a whole bunch of water out of the ground, they're going to charge you more and more for that. So a lot of people in Las Vegas, they don't have lush green lawns like we do here in California. They have xeriscapes. They have the low flow shower heads, the low flow toilets, right? They're doing everything they can to even recycle water. They're using recycled water from wastewater treatment plants to water like medians and things like that to help make their water resources last. And those are all things that you can do around your home and within your community to make your water resources last. So that's it, ladies and gents. You made it. All 3 videos on water everywhere. Whew, I bet you're glad this is over. I'm Mr. Kennedy, and I will see you next time.